Hello, and welcome to Design to Align, Achieving Course Alignment and Improving Student Outcomes. This is a workshop presented by LSU Online and Continuing Education, and it's aimed for faculty who will be starting course development for courses that are offered in a fully online format for a program going through LSU Online. However, everything that we will cover today will be applicable to any faculty for any course, regardless of modality. I wanted to mention this up front because we make a few references to our course development process throughout the workshop. So whether you're in our course development process or not, you'll find strategies and tips to help you as you redesign or design your own courses. We have a couple of facilitators here with us. My name is Lynn, and I'm joined here with Rochelle. We both work with LSU Online and Continuing Education in the Design and Development team. So if you're not familiar with the Design and Development team, or D&D as we call ourselves, we partner closely with faculty to create high quality learning experiences, and we incorporate instructional design, user experience, and other design principles in our work. We also facilitate faculty professional development offerings like this workshop to provide support and guidance to faculty who are designing, redesigning, or teaching courses for blended or online delivery. So we like to begin our course design work by focusing on intended outcomes and then seeing how we can organize the course materials so that students can meet those outcomes successfully. This process of tuning the materials to the outcomes is called alignment. And during our session today, we're going to walk you through the alignment of a course as a model for you. Now, I recognize that some of you who are watching may have had a lot of experience designing and developing online courses. So you may hear some things that are familiar to you, but you may also hear some new strategies and some new methods that you can incorporate. Now, as we go through this workshop, there will be times when we ask you to pause the video and do some action on your end, on your own course or the course that you're developing. And then when you're ready to proceed, you can press play again and continue with the informational part of the workshop. So by the end of this session, we are hopeful that you will be able to write an observable course outcome, deconstruct that outcome into measurable and specific module learning objectives, align those to assessments, and then identify career skills that students could gain from your course so that they could, learn how to articulate that in their future employment opportunities. And we also want you to think about and be able to describe your unique course value. Before we get started, I want you to keep in mind that there are many factors that affect the quality of online learning experiences in a course. And this ranges from the course design, which is the forethought and planning that goes into an online course, to the delivery mechanisms, to the course content, the learning management system, and even the student's role with respect to engagement and readiness. For a fully online course, students do have to be motivated to self-regulate and be engaged in that process. So I want to emphasize that course design is the focus of today's session, and it is the focus of our design and development process. The teaching of an online course, we do have some professional development workshops and resources for that, but the focus is on what you do before students are enrolled in the course. The delivery piece is what happens after students log in and begin to engage with the content, instructor, and other students. So today we're going to really focus on the design of your course. And again, that's everything that happens that you build into the course before the term starts. So I'm going to start with an analogy, and it's going to be about traveling and driving. So when you think about travel, You are probably not, or at least I'm not, someone who gets in the car and drives around aimlessly without a destination in mind. Those types of adventures are fun, but probably not the norm. Instead, you probably identify where you want to go and think about where you are in relation to that destination, and then plan the best route to get there based on the time of day or traffic. And that way, you're way more likely to not only end up getting to where you wanted to go, but getting there as quickly and efficiently as possible. So you identify that final goal or destination and determine where you are currently located. And then you figure out how to get there and what resources you'll need along the way. Do you have enough fuel, snacks for the kids, road trips and games and activities? Are you using a navigation app? And are you planning for traffic? All of those things that you need to support your goal in reaching that final destination. These are all things that we do when we think about designing our courses. So alignment, that's our focus for today. Alignment is the intentional connection between course outcomes, learning objectives, assessments, activities, and materials. If a course you're teaching is aligned, it means that your stated course goals and learning objectives are in harmony with the activities and assessments given to students. It helps ensure that both you and your students have accurate expectations about what will be taught in your course and what you'll be assessing students on. It helps keep you and your students going in the right direction, and it's instrumental in measuring your student learning. And it also helps properly measure effectiveness, your effectiveness of instruction. So on the slide here, we have a lot of puzzle pieces, and they all do connect and support the course outcomes. Those course outcomes are the aggregated knowledge, skills, and abilities that students should be able to successfully demonstrate at the end of your course. So that's the target, that's your final destination. The learning objectives support the achievement of those larger course goals at the level of a particular module or topic. So they're much more specific, they're much more narrow in scope, and I want you to think of them as steps on the map that you're taking to get to the final destination. Those are those milestones for the course. Your assessments are the ways we use to measure whether or not a student has achieved those learning goals or is on target to achieve those objectives and outcomes. Your activities are the experiences that students engage in that prepare them to achieve those objectives. And your course materials, that's the content, the instructional resources that you provide to help your students achieve those objectives and outcomes. So all of those puzzle pieces work together, but let's take a look at an example of an art class. And for this scenario, I want you to put yourself in the mindset of a student. So you're taking Art 1003, which is a foundational course on two-dimensional design, or basically learning how to draw. And students can expect that one of the larger goals, one of the course outcomes, is to create an accurate representation of form in a two-dimensional format. So as the weeks start, you start learning how to define basic principles like value and shape and contrast, and you start demonstrating those by drawing circles and spheres and adding shading and contrast and other elements. And throughout the semester, you may move on to still lifes or maybe the human form, and you're continuously improving your drawing skills, hopefully. At the end of the semester, you log into Moodle to see what your final project is going to be. And you see that you've been tasked with writing a 10-page research paper on a contemporary artist. As a student who's been doing all of this drawing for the semester or the term, is that what you have expected? Is that what you feel the course has prepared you to do? And do you feel ready to do this? Now, in defense of this teacher, a research paper is absolutely related to art because you're researching contemporary artists or even historical artists, and it could absolutely enhance the teaching of a course like this. But when we look at this assessment, which is writing a 10-page research paper, is that really satisfying the goal of creating a two-dimensional drawing of some type? It's not. So this is an example of misalignment. Misalignment makes courses fragmented and ineffective, and it gives students mixed messages about what you're teaching versus what you're asking them to submit as their demonstration of those mastery skills. It may cause students to spend time on meaningless activities or what they perceive to be meaningless because they can't see that connection of why am I doing this if it's not, doesn't seem to be related to those learning goals. And it may actually cause you to over or underestimate the effectiveness of your instruction. So when you begin designing your course, I want you to think about who your students are and where they are in terms of entry-level skills and where you want them to finish. So consider, what career skills should students gain? And by career skills or workforce skills, I want you to consider things like communication, collaboration, teamwork, being able to assess and evaluate data and produce some type of findings on that. Those are cross-functional and cross-disciplinary skills that students will need in the workforce once they graduate. Also, the other part of that is what skills, knowledge, and abilities are they coming into your course with? Does this course fit into an official program? Is it a prerequisite? Is it a fundamental or advanced course? Is it a graduate level? And then who are your students? Are they first-time college students? Are they non-majors or non-traditional students? So think about all of those pieces because that can help form your decisions on how you develop that course. So at this time, I'm going to ask you to take a minute to reflect on your course. Jot down some ideas and things such as the level of your course and what knowledge students should come into the course with. And then I want you to list 2 to 3 topics, skills, or concepts that drive your course. Think about your elevator pitch. If you had 30 seconds to sell your course to potential students, what would you say about your course? What would they get out of it? How is it relevant to their future coursework or to their future career goals? These decisions and notes will go into the way we craft our course outcomes. So at this time, I invite you to pause the video and do that action. And when you're ready, go ahead and resume the video. All right, welcome back. So this is an example course that we will refer to throughout the remainder of our session today. Poly 2051 is a foundational course. It's 100% online, and it has been redeveloped with LSU Online. Now, I want you to assume that the instructor for this course did exactly what you just did. They reflected on the course and wrote down some of those key topics and ideas and skills that the course will cover. So for this course, the key topics that drive this course are historical debates and issues around the Constitution, the change of the social climate over time, the structure of the government, and various policies, including economy, healthcare, etc. So for this workshop, we will be focusing mostly on that first topic of the historical issues and debates. And this topic, this outline here, this list, allows us to organize our course into different units, different modules. But these bullet points don't really tell students what they need to demonstrate by the end of the course. They're just, high-level topics that they may see in the course in some way, shape, or format. So when we talk about our course outcomes and determining mastery of skills and concepts with a direct line of evidence, we have to craft our course outcomes. These are the overall expectations of what students will learn in a course. So it's those knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? Don't think about content or coverage. I want you to instead consider what students should be able to do with what they've learned by the end of the semester. How will students demonstrate these things? What can they produce to show faculty that they've learned to apply their new knowledge? So these describe the really broadest goals of the course. ones that require higher level thinking abilities. They require students to synthesize and apply many discrete skills or areas of content. Course outcomes typically are aligned to the program goals. So if your course does sit inside of a structured program, you want to think about which activities and which course outcomes align with the program goals that your department has for the students. So think of each course and its outcomes as a piece of a puzzle to the bigger program picture. For a student to be successful in the overall program, they have to succeed in each of the courses. So these are mapped to those program outcomes. These should also help prepare them for those career-ready skills. So again, application of problem solving, communication, and industry-related concepts. They should be written as clear, measurable, and observable statements in order to convey those expectations for students. This also allows you to assess whether those outcomes have been met. And we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Your course outcomes are assessed through a culminating or summative exam or project at the end of the course. So it's kind of that ribbon at the end of the course, right? That you take everything that you've learned, and at the end you produce some deliverable, whether that's an exam or project. And the results can tell you to what extent the students have learned that material, and whether your instruction and your course materials and your activities and everything helps students track on that mastery level. We're often asked how many outcomes a course should have, and I would say it depends on the course. It depends on the course content and what skills you absolutely want to ensure your students exit your course with. And you do have to have some type of assessment mapped to each of your course outcomes. So typically 4 to 5 outcomes is sufficient for a 3-credit-hour course. Because remember, these are broad skills. These are larger goals that we're going to break down into each unit of learning. So there are a lot of faculty who use textbooks, right, as a supplemental piece of material. Students read the textbook and then they get lecture material from them, and then they do activities and resources and things like that. Your textbook should just be a supplemental resource. Your textbook is not the course. So your outcome should reflect everything they learn in the course, not just what they get out of a textbook. So, think about what else you're adding to your course. Add a critical thinking piece. Talk about your experience and your knowledge. You don't want your students to say, this wasn't in my textbook, so I don't know how to do this, or this problem that I'm being given isn't exactly the way it was displayed in the textbook, so I don't know how to manipulate all of that material and come out with the correct response or be able to analyze and provide a recommendation. So think beyond the textbook for that. And this will help them in their professional life by giving them real life situations. And, not everything is clear cut from a textbook, right? So offer those additional experiences to those students, talk about your own experience and research, and really make it relevant and tie it to kind of that real life aspect of it. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what course outcomes are. And again, those are those larger goals that you have for your course. And the next piece of that is writing out your module learning objectives. So these are derived from the course outcomes. And of course, they should also be aligned to those. So if you're asking students to do some type of analysis, we first need to break that down and make sure that they are prepared to do that analysis. So you can think of learning objectives as the stepping stones to the course outcome, or subsets of course outcomes. Think of them as the building blocks to produce whatever is used to demonstrate mastery of the outcome. How will students get from where they are now to that outcome, to where you want them to get to? Those learning objectives are a way for you to structure, sequence, and plan your course topics in a way that provides students an opportunity to achieve those outcomes. We do recommend that you develop your learning objectives before you choose your instructional materials and activities. So even if you are revising a course or if you're using a textbook and therefore you have, many resources and activities already prepared, we suggest this method to ensure that all of the resources and activities that you have planned are appropriate to your learning objectives. So if something doesn't fit the goals that you have for your students, then you may have to reconsider whether that's relevant to your course. And we'll talk more about materials later on in the session. Textbook publishers are, more frequently including learning objectives in their resources. And while these objectives may be a good place to start and can be used as a guide, we don't recommend adopting a complete set of textbook objectives for your course, because developing your own learning objective allows for comprehensive and integrated coverage of concepts. Again, remember, the textbook is not your course. It's a supplemental, it's a piece of your course. Textbooks also compartmentalize objectives by chapter and even by chapter section, whereas a module in an online course is a unit of instruction that could cover multiple key concepts that can span multiple chapters. Therefore, developing your own cohesive list of module learning objectives helps ensure that the concepts are covered comprehensively. Developing your own list of learning objectives also develops a balanced view of the course content. The textbook provides a unidimensional view through the text and the preferences and the biases of the authors, right? So you want to make sure that you are injecting your own presence and your own voice into this course content. It also helps with scaling the course. Textbooks often include more learning objectives that are realistic to adequately cover and assess in a 3-credit-hour course. Depending on the publisher, for a single module, you may require students to read 3 chapters from the textbook. And when you add up all of those learning objectives for a module, you may actually have 12 to 15 learning objectives from the textbook. And instead, if you take a look at your module and what you want students to gain from that unit of learning, you'll probably find that you'll only have, no more than 7 or 8 for that, because there are ways to group those activities and group those objectives to be more comprehensive. This will also help you avoid frequent course revisions, because when the textbook updates, that means you don't have to do as many updates to your own course. So your learning objectives should align to your course outcomes, and obviously they must also be tied to at least one assessment. So we write these in student-facing language. Instead of the student will do this, we want the student to know that you're connected to them. So we write, upon completion of the module, you will be able to. And that makes it, easier for students to grasp the meaning, the use. We want to avoid the use of discipline jargon, unexplained terminology. And it's really to convey that this is about what the student will be able to do and not what the instructor will teach. So it's all about giving that transparency of, by the end of this module, I'm expecting you to be able to do X, Y, and Z. So this was a lot of information. So I want to talk briefly about the differences between those course outcomes and module learning objectives. Again, those course outcomes describe the overarching goals that a student will be able to demonstrate by the end of the course. They describe the knowledge and skills and abilities that students will be able to demonstrate at the end of the course. The module learning objectives are smaller scale. They describe small, discrete skills, so they're subsets. And again, I want you to think of those as the building blocks used to produce whatever is used to demonstrate mastery of the outcome. So depending on the nature of your course, you may consider some of the course outcomes more important or weighted than others. And by reflecting on the relative importance of your course outcomes, you can determine where and in how many modules these outcomes should be reinforced. Remember that course outcomes can be broad enough to chunk major concepts together, it's possible that one of your outcomes is addressed in 2 or even 3 modules. For example, if you go back to that poly course, if we had a course outcome that was discuss the change in the social climate over time and the impact on today's political environment, if that's one of your course outcomes that you consider very critical for the course, then this outcome is likely to be repeated and reinforced in multiple modules and supported by several learning objectives. So in one module, you may focus on the social issues. In another one, you may be focusing on social policies. Your lecture materials, videos, scenarios, and activities may differ depending on whether the module is focusing on issues versus policies, but all of that collectively would support that course outcome of discuss the change in the social climate over time. So next we'll discuss and describe a tool that might be helpful for you as you work through writing or revising your course outcomes and module learning objectives. We have a handy dandy formula. The formula for writing outcomes includes an action verb, which is what you want them to do, a noun, which is the topic of the outcome, and the context, such as the when or the how. When writing or revising your course outcomes and learning objectives, we recommend that they are measurable and observable. And we want to avoid soft verbs such as know and appreciate, understand. You might very well want your students to know or understand a particular concept, but the objective should be written as to how you're going to measure that level of knowing or understanding. So think about, how will I know it when I see it? What does the student have to do for me to know that they fully understand this concept? So verbs like comprehend and appreciate, these are sometimes called soft verbs. And you want to just think about how you're going to demonstrate that. How would students demonstrate their appreciation of something? What are they submitting to you as proof? So I want to also emphasize that there should only be one action verb per objective or outcome to avoid confusion. So the next piece of this, okay, well, you've told me which verbs not to use. How do I select which ones I should use? And for that, we turn to Bloom's taxonomy. And you may be very familiar with this. It's a framework that classifies various levels of thinking and learning. Our goal as educators is to lay a foundation of knowledge for students and help them build on that knowledge. At the lowest level, we ask students to learn facts and basic concepts, but we don't want them to just, regurgitate those facts and things. We want them to take that information and be able to explain those concepts and apply them to new concepts and make relationships and compare and contrast and do much more. So where your students begin on this framework and where you want them to end up at the end of the course will depend on the level of course that you teach. For Poly 2051, the course we're looking at today, it is a foundational course. So students will most likely start at that remember level, that basic foundational level. And by the end, students are asked to apply and analyze. You'll notice that they're not going all the way up to create, which is to produce new or original work. They're only asked to kind of apply that knowledge and analyze that. An upper level course, however, that probably includes prerequisites, they may start at the apply level and move all the way to the top where they're asked to produce something new and original. So the words associated with each level will guide you as you write your learning goals. Now you can Google Bloom's taxonomy and that you'll see a bunch of lists that you can print out and put on your wall and have handy with you. And you'll see some crossover, and you'll probably even see some of those soft words like understand and comprehend. But the key takeaway here is that the action verb that you choose should be measurable and observable and indicate the manner in which you're going to assess students. So we'll talk about assessments in a few minutes, but just remember that the more action-based verbs that you use, the easier it will be to clearly define success metrics. So let's go back to Poly 2051, and I want you to look at 2 examples of a course outcome that were written. So course outcome 1 says, be aware of the historical issues and debates during the time of the Constitution. And course outcome 2 is summarize the historical issues and debates that surround the Constitution, including civil liberties and civil rights. So I'm going to stay silent for a second so you can process and make a decision on which of the 2 examples is written in a way that is measurable and observable. I hope that you chose course outcome 2 because that is correct. The use of the word summarize in option 2, that is measurable. It is allowing the instructor to clearly observe if the student achieves the objectives at an acceptable level. It also includes the context that they should be including civil liberties and civil rights within that assignment. Option number 2 also conveys some context around the assignment, because most likely this is going to be a writing assignment since you can't really summarize something in a multiple choice question. But it could also be a short answer or essay question within a larger exam. So it's time to pause again, and I'd like you to choose a verb for 1 or 2 of those main topics that drive your course that you wrote down a few minutes ago. And remember, this is about what students should be able to demonstrate by the end of the course, not for a specific unit. So when you're ready, go ahead and resume playing the video. All right, so now we're going to take a look at how we can map career skills and the module learning objectives to that course outcome. So we have the course outcome that we just selected, and this large outcome has been broken down into more manageable objectives because before they can summarize something, they have to be able to describe the conditions and identify specific liberties and, be able to compare and contrast liberties and rights. So we begin with the lower level action verb describe, and then we move up actually into compare and contrast. So we're starting with more of a foundational knowledge, but even within this unit, we are moving up that Bloom's taxonomy framework. From the outcome, we have identified several career skills that students will develop. So based on the action of, summarizing and potentially writing a paper or, completing short answer essay questions on the subject matter, students will develop writing skills, potentially presentation skills, depending on the assessment that we'll choose in a few minutes. They'll develop critical thinking, research skills, and even ethical reasoning skills. So these things are applicable regardless of what course or what career a student is choosing. So they are cross-disciplinary, cross-industrial. They are applicable regardless of their future goals. So we're going to pause again. And this time, I want you to break apart your course outcome into 1 or more objectives and identify 1 or more career skills that students will develop. So go ahead and pause. And when you're ready, resume and play the rest of the session. All right, so now let's take a look at where you can share all of this information that you've identified and worked on in your course so that students know what you're expecting of them and what they'll walk away from the course with. We suggest providing a bulleted list of the relevant career skills for your course on your welcome page so that students are aware from the very start how the course is helping them develop those real-world skills. As for your course outcomes and learning objectives, those should be shared or referenced in 3 different locations throughout your course. On the left, we have the syllabus where students will find a list of the course outcomes and learning objectives. And keep in mind, this is if you are doing course development with the D&D team at LSU Online, or if you have requested a template for your campus course. On the right is a specific module, and the learning objectives are listed here that the students will complete within that module. And you'll notice that behind each of those objectives, we have coded it to the course outcome it supports. So students can always know exactly why they're doing something in the course and how that connection happens all the way up to those course goals. We also post these objectives inside all of our activities and assessments. So again, students understand how everything that they're doing in the course is connected, intentional, and purposeful, and relevant. So in summary for this section, we start off with broad course outcomes, which are then broken down into measurable learning objectives. The learning objectives should be measurable and reflect the level and rigor of your planned assessments. And all of that should be tied to your career skills that you're working with students to increase and improve and hone. So at this time, I'm going to hand over the reins to Rochelle, who will walk you through assessments, activities, and even more things. So Rochelle?
Hello, everyone. I hope that everyone is excited about assessments. Assessments are a key component to the course and play a critical role in your students' learning journey. So they allow instructors to measure student achievement and the mastery of your course outcomes that you created, starting with Lynn. The verbs you used in your outcomes and objectives will guide the types of assessments that you build. Remember our outcome to summarize the historical debates and issues, including civil liberties and civil rights. Lynn mentioned that this implies a writing assignment, but it could also be a presentation, a video, or a class debate in a forum. So when choosing the verbs, you must consider your assessment strategy. Can you really describe something through multiple choice or true/false questions? Students have to put information into their own words to describe it, not just click on a multiple choice question. Instead, students might identify, match, classify, or even label through multiple choice and true/false questions. So remember to think about that action verb as you're developing your assessment strategy. Keep in mind you should have several auto-graded questions that assess an outcome or create questions that are more open-ended and require students to use higher order thinking skills throughout your course. And you're also going to want to scaffold your assessments. Think back to the Bloom's framework. In Poly 2051, they aren't going to ask students to evaluate government policies before they even know what those policies are. They'll have to first identify the policies before they can apply or even evaluate them. So we're going to discuss how you can scaffold your assessments by using two types of assessments, formative and summative. Formative assessments check for a student's understanding of the key concepts within a unit or a module of learning. It's a checkpoint for you to see how students are progressing towards achieving those learning objectives that you've built. The goal of a formative assessment is to monitor student learning to provide ongoing feedback that can be used by instructors to improve teaching and by students to improve learning. More specifically, formative assessments can help students identify their strengths and weaknesses and target areas that might need work before larger assessments. They can also help faculty to recognize where students are struggling and address those problems immediately rather than waiting down the road where it's more problems. So formative assessments are generally low stakes, which means they have low or no point value. And some examples might include asking students to draw a concept map in class to represent their understanding of a topic, or submit 1 or 2 sentences identifying the main point of a lecture, or turn in a research proposal early for feedback before they delve deeper into the research part. Here on your screen are a few examples of formative assessments in a Moodle course, such as a lesson, a quiz, a forum, or even an assignment. Quizzes, like you see here, offer quite a few auto-graded question types, while essay questions, written assignments, or forums will typically require manual grading and take a little bit more time from you. Moodle also has an interactive feature called H5P that offers a suite of activities. These allow for formative assessments and can be embedded into your lecture materials. Some of the activities can be embedded into or integrated into the gradebook, or they can be used for self-assessments for students to check their knowledge and ungraded. Some examples of H5P might be a drag and drop, where they have to identify a term and drag it to the right section of an image, dialogue cards to study terms or images that go with a term. Those are similar to flashcards, or even quiz questions. And again, these can be used for a self-assessment rather than a formative assessment or a graded assessment. So summative assessments should be an evaluation of how well the students have grasped the essential knowledge and skills that you deemed important for the course or the course outcomes. Your final exam, a project, a portfolio, or even a research paper should include the components that align to your stated course outcomes. So you can also design your final project or portfolio to be useful to your students in job interviews or career advancement. You can build in milestones or checkpoints throughout the course to assist students in developing those things step by step rather than all at once, and to develop the necessary KSAs or knowledge, skills, and abilities to handle your summative assessment successfully. And even though it is an assessment, an end of course reflection on the career skills students gained would also be very useful for you. So back to Bloom's taxonomy. Remember to consider the formative assessments are going to be those more basic, lower level action verbs, and your high level course outcomes are going to be the summative assessment or the summative verbs. So think about going from multiple choice and true false, then to essays and short answers and projects as you go up the ladder. So you'll usually work from the bottom of that pyramid up. The formative assessments are lower on the scale and the summative are higher on the scale so that you can monitor the learning as the students are going through the course before they get to the part where they have to grasp things at a firmer, more abstract level. Here is an example of a summative assessment. This assessment appears to be an essay or a writing assignment, but if you take a look at the instructions, you'll see that it is closely aligned to our sample course outcome. But to make sure, let's go ahead and take a closer look at how it's aligned. Now that you can see everything mapped out, we can look back at our Poly 2051 course. We have the course outcome, module objectives, and have established both an aligned formative assessment and a summative assessment. And don't forget about the career skills that the summative assessment will allow your students to demonstrate. In this example, we would be asking students to demonstrate research skills, critical thinking, writing skills, presentation skills, and ethical reasoning. So consider, have we established alignment between the course outcomes and the objectives and the formative and summative assessments? For example, how would you assess learning objective 1? It's important to remember that all learning objectives should be assessed at the appropriate level, which we might not be seeing here. So to summarize this section, our best practices include regular formative assessments to track progress, monitor learning, and create opportunities for individualized student to instructor feedback at major points in the course, and using authentic assessments that prepare students for their careers. Don't forget to look at some of the Learn and Go videos that we have about authentic assessments that are linked on this video. So now please pause the video and take a minute to practice. Consider both a formative assessment to align with your objectives and a summative assessment to align with your course outcome. When you have come up with an idea, please resume the video. Okay, welcome back. It's now time to think about the materials and activities that will prepare students to successfully pass the assessments you've planned. So your content and activities should also be aligned with your outcomes. Everything you put into a course should be intentional and support the course outcomes in some way. Think of the content as the instructional materials of the course. It can be multimedia, meaning a combination of text, images, and animation, or it could be a textbook where you provide additional guidance and information. It could even be YouTube or TED Talk videos, or it could be all generated and created by you. So your lecture material should differ from them depending on the specific learning objectives that are covered in each module. It's common for instructors to choose their resources before developing learning objectives. However, setting learning objectives first will help you determine the best resources to include to help your students meet those learning objectives. When determining which type or types of instructional material to include in each module, look to your module learning objectives and consider what type or types of instruction would best assist your students in achieving the module learning objectives. For example, videos might help the students visualize process-related techniques such as math equations. Or you might find it helpful to create or locate a video that illustrates the process rather than trying to explain it through text alone. A lot of your students learn better by seeing things, or it might help them to grasp the content a little bit better. Other, less complex concepts might be understood more easily through text and images by themselves. So textbooks are another common resource that instructors use, but remember they should not be used as the only source, but as one of many sources of knowledge in your course. But your content should be relevant and appropriate to the level of the course. Remember, is it an entry-level course? Is it an advanced course? And it also should be chunked in a way that supports the acquisition of your course outcomes. Because you're not there with the student, make sure that you also integrate your voice within your course. This creates a better engagement and a connection with the students. And short videos that cover specific topics are a wonderful way to do this. You can also look at the Learn and Go videos. We have a wonderful video on inserting the instructor voice into your course. Activities are the experiences that students engage in that prepare them to achieve the intended outcomes. So these can include assessments, which can be graded or non-graded. Activities are included to provide opportunities for student engagement and interaction, such as forums, group projects, virtual tours, or any number of things that you can insert into your course. But these should also be relevant and appropriate for the level of the course and the topic. Here are some examples from Poly 2051. On the right, we have an infographic of how a bill becomes a law, which could be supplemented by a video from Crash Course or from Schoolhouse Rock. And on the left, we have a forum where students might address a prompt and then engage in a dialogue with other students regarding that prompt. If your campus has H5P, that can also be used for instructional materials, including presentations, video quizzes, and branch scenarios like Think Your Own Adventures, and allowing for a more individualized approach to some of those activities. But those are some examples that you could use for different activities throughout the course. The image on the left is from a Moodle book resource where the instructor introduces the main topic and then provides a series of short lecture videos to students. Then on the right, students are going through an interactive activity built from documents in the National Archives. They can inspect each tile, but the goal is to match each amendment to specific evidence of that amendment in action. So as you're planning your course, think about what resources you could include or search for, and what type or types of activities students could do that support that learning objective or those learning objectives that you wrote down earlier. In the next section, we're going to talk about how to plan and map all of those pieces together. So we've talked a lot about making sure all the bits and pieces of your course support the course outcomes, but how do you organize it all? It can be difficult to visualize all of these components and connections working together. One strategy we use is called a course alignment map. Here we have an example of a blank course alignment map, which has cells for you to enter your course outcomes, your learning objectives, your assessments, your instructional materials. This particular layout is helpful because you can see if your outcomes, objectives, assessments, and instructional materials are aligned. We've taken the example course that we used throughout this presentation and put some of those components into the map to show you what a completed map might look like. Now, keep in mind, your map might not look exactly like this, depending on which design process you're going through. In this example, I have 4 learning objectives. However, when we look to the right, I'm only assessing learning objective number 1 and learning objective number 3. This tells me that I need to evaluate those objectives. Are they in the right module? Are they critical to the course? If so, we need to add materials and assessments for those other 2 learning objectives, numbers 2 and 4. But this horizontal view can help you ensure the plan for your course is what is executed and students engage with the materials in the way that you expect them to, and you're focusing on everything that you need to be focusing on in that module. So now that we've learned about how to write course outcomes and learning objectives and align them with assessments, content, and activities, it's time to think holistically about your course again. This might sound a little corny, but you want your students to remember your course and how valuable it was. We want them to remember your course because of how interesting, relevant, and engaging it is, and you are. The students want to learn from you. They want your knowledge, experience, research. They don't necessarily just want to be handed a textbook. They want to have that experience and knowledge that you can give them. So what are the key lectures or key activities that resonate with students that you constantly get positive feedback on? Think about that for a second. Then think about what are areas where students typically struggle in your course, and how can you support those areas in an online environment? What additional resources can you give your students? How can you transform experiences that you have in your face-to-face course into an online environment? Then, which activities and resources can help your students develop career skills? So there's a lot of different things for you to think about at this point. You can still deliver your course to students, have whole group discussions, and add a level of engagement to your courses, but it's going to look different from your traditional courses. You may have synchronous study sessions, provide supplemental resources, add real world scenarios and case studies, or even structure group projects within an online course. And students are going to remember your course when they see what it's doing for them. A course that is fully aligned helps students to see the purpose of what they're doing the entire way through the course. So nothing comes as a surprise. When a course is properly aligned, the critical course components, such as your course outcomes, your learning objectives, assessments, activities, your instructional content, all work together to achieve the desired learning objectives. You can determine alignment by thinking carefully about how each component of instruction is related. So as an instructor, objectives are specific, measurable, and observable, and aligned properly to your assessments, which are supported by relevant and appropriate activities and course materials. Hopefully you have clear evidence as to whether or not students have achieved those desired learning outcomes at the end of a course. Your application activity or your homework is to take what we've started in this workshop and flesh it out. You've already written a course outcome and deconstructed it into multiple learning objectives. So now we want you to think about the types of assessments and activities that can support these. This activity is for you to really think about the structure of your course and determine if it's aligned. I do want to emphasize, however, that this activity can be done for any course that you teach, regardless of modality, whether it's an LSU course, it's an LSUA course, if it's a campus course, an online course. All of these courses can be aligned and follow this method. So if you're interested in receiving a copy of the alignment map, reach out to your designer in residence. Some support that we have available are designer in residence and FTC in residence. These can support you as you participate in the special focus program. While you're working on your course alignment map, you can reach out to the designer in residence, or if you're working with a specific designer, they will help you with that also. So the FTC can help as you begin working on your course and have more technical or Moodle related questions. For those going through the one-to-one design model, your assigned LXD is who you should go to with questions or for assistance. And thank you everyone for listening, and I hope that this is a valuable resource for you. Again, please feel free to reach out to your designer in residence or your FTC in residence or your specific designer if you're working in a one-to-one model.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.